Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Accelerating Software Supply Chain with JFrog Artifactory on Fast Object. This event is brought to you in partnership with Pure Storage and produced by ActualTech Media. Thanks so much for joining us on the webinar today. We've got a great presentation lined up for you. Before we get started, there's just a few things that you should know about the event. First off, I should mention my name is David Davis of ActualTech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational. We want to help you to get your questions answered, and we'll be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the webinar today. So keep your questions coming during the presentation. We also have a best question prize, which I'll talk about here in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to call your attention there to the handouts tab. It's there that you'll find a couple of additional resources on today's topic. There is the blog on modernizing JFrog Artifactory on Fast Object. And there's also a white paper that you should check out, a PDF resource that you can download there and read after the event. So make sure that you download that now, and that way you'll have that additional information handy after the event concludes. And then finally, at the end of the webinar, I'll be announcing the winner of our Amazon $300 gift card door prize. If you're watching this on demand, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. The prize terms can be found there in the handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize. This is for an additional $50 Amazon gift card. Of course, you have to ask a question to be entered into that drawing. And so if you have something on your mind, you're wondering, exactly how this would work or how it would integrate with something you have in your IT infrastructure today, don't hesitate to ask, and you'll be entered into that prize drawing. Of course, you still must meet the ActualTech Media prize terms and conditions, and we'll contact the prize winner of the best question prize after the event. All right, so with that, I'm excited now to introduce you to today's expert presenter. Welcome, Bikash Roy Chowdhury, who is a technical director for EDA and DevOps at Pure Storage. Bikash, it's great to have you on the event.
Thank you, David. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, before we get started, I've got a couple of poll questions for everyone out there in the audience. The first question on the screen, it says, JFrog Artifactory, do you use it every day? Do you just know about it? Are you planning to use it, or do you not know really what it is at all? And so I'll leave this question up here for just a moment, and we want to hear your feedback on this question. Is this something that you are very familiar with and are using, maybe just have heard of it, plan to use it, or not quite sure what it is at this point? This will help us to better shape, of course, today's presentation. I want to ask you, Bikash, what are some of the primary use cases for JFrog Artifactory?
A great question, David. I think a lot of people are responding on the polls right now, but Artifactory, as a lot of people would know, is primarily a central repository for binary packages. And how is it different from, people are more associated with Git and source code, and that's where it's called as source code, and you do version control on source code. But once you compile the code and what the outcome is, and those executable and binary packages needs to be managed. And that is where JFrog Artifactory comes in. And one of the biggest use cases for Artifactory is the central management that can scale in capacity as well as scale in performance. And that is exactly what we're going to talk about in this presentation today.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you to everyone who responded there to the poll. We do appreciate your feedback. I've got one more question before we get started, and that is simply around the Pure Storage data platform. In general, is Pure Storage something that you already have and you use? Is it something you just know about, plan to use, or you're not really familiar with Pure Storage at all? So again, I'll leave this question up here for just a moment, let everyone respond. And while we do that, Bikash, maybe this is something you're going to talk about in the presentation, but why is the marriage between JFrog Artifactory and Pure Storage so beneficial? Why are we talking about this today?
Yeah, I'll just leave it at the cue over here about the performance. We have the title as Fast Object, and as object, it comes to everybody's mind, oh, it's going to be slow, deep, and cheap. it's quite the opposite when we actually run it on pure storage platform like FlashBlade. We'll talk more about it during the presentation. But the short answer is it is going to be really interesting to see and find as more and more modern applications like JFrog Artifactory would like to use object store as a backend storage platform, how actually pure storage can actually elevate the pain points that we normally have when you start to scale the size of the data that is sitting in the backend storage, and how do you make it much more accessible, not only to the local users in the data centers, closer to the data centers, but also geographically spread out in different geographic locations. So that'll be a lot more interesting as we start to move forward with the presentation.
Excellent. All right. Well, I don't want to steal the thunder from your presentation. It sounds like this could help a lot of companies out there. Thank you for a little sneak peek into it. And thank you to everyone out there who responded to the poll. We do appreciate your feedback. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Bikash. Take it away.
Thank you, David. I'll just jump right into the agenda. So we'll look into the first as a sneak peek into the CI/CD process, where exactly Artifactory fits in. Talk briefly about Artifactory. I probably saw from the polling questions earlier, a lot of people are aware of what is Artifactory. I'm not going to dive deeper into that, but just touch upon what exactly Artifactory for the interest of people who are not aware of that. And then get into this pure storage aspect of it, which I also saw a lot of people know about us and also use it in the day-to-day operations. So that's great, great information. And then we talk about some data challenges, because as we start to look into the Artifactory aspect in a lot of the customer implementations, we notice that data is growing, it's scaling humongously in exponential manner. And there are a lot of challenges that the customers face, and the businesses really have to overcome those hurdles. And we'll talk about that. And then where does FlashBlade fit in? And that's another area that I would like to focus into, and then talk more about how FlashBlade can actually elevate some of those problems. We then go into the archival aspect of it as to what happens when you're done with your long artifacts and packages sitting in there, and you really don't want to throw it away, but you still want to keep it, but don't want to use the production environments. What are the choices that we have, or the options we have? And then finally, how do we actually measure? How do we actually visualize my performance of the Artifactory, the application, the data sitting on the backend storage? How do we monitor them? How do we report those? The speed in which it's been uploading and downloading, the number of connections you're having to the application. So how do we actually measure those? And there are a lot of tools out there, and we will talk about some of the common tools that we've been seeing in customer scenarios, and how those connectors connect to the backend endpoints. It could be the application, it could be the storage. We'll talk more about it. And then finally, we conclude with the value that we normally highlight with applications like Artifactory running on pure storage. So now let's get into the overview of what is CI/CD, which I think a lot of people would know what exactly happens right from writing code, running tests and compiling your code, generating different executables and binary packages, and then obviously moving on and promoting that package into your deployment process, and finally releasing it into production. Now, what I try to highlight in this slide is that the entire CI/CD workflow, either you're running it in a bare metal VM or a Kubernetes environment, doesn't matter. They could be all sitting on a pure storage platform where data doesn't have to really move across, because the data continuity is what we are providing. And for all the applications and the workflow that you're designed on top of that. And because it is completely API rich in the way it has been integrated, and you can actually customize it based on your requirement, because a CI/CD workflow is never going to be a one size fit all. Every business actually does it differently. The tools may be similar, but how do you use the tools in your workflow is completely dependent upon the business. But running it on a standard data platform like Pure Storage kind of enhances the overall experience, not only from a performance perspective, but also the operational benefits that you get out of this entire integration. Let's touch upon some of the Artifactory features very briefly. As I mentioned already, a lot of people know about what Artifactory is, but it's basically a single source of truth for all your binary packages, which obviously not only maintains your packages, but also the dependencies that comes along with it. That's the That's the artifacts that like compilers that you're having, the Java JREs that you're having, depending upon what kind of environment that you have. It's in your software environment. So it's basically managing the entire life cycle of your binary packages that you actually use in the different repositories inside Artifactory. And then the challenge happens is, why do we talk about data? Because yeah, we have Artifactory. Artifactory has got different flavors. It has got the Pro, it has got the Enterprise, which obviously has the HA, and there are a few other flavors of Artifactory available, which can actually fit into various different business models and the size of business. But why is it? Are we talking about data? Because data is something which is constantly growing in an exponential manner. As an end user, you may not be aware of that, but there's so many developers, and starting from a very small organization, a small software development team, and as the team keeps on growing from mid to a larger enterprise size, the size of the data also keeps on going exponential. The number of repos you'll be using inside the file store. We'll talk about file store in a moment. But those are the different components that you normally find in a particular Artifactory environment. But data is growing, and it needs to be localized, or it can be available on demand for even not only organizations or businesses who are working in a single location, but also spread out across the globe. And basically what matters is performance. How do I actually upload my artifacts, my packages, and download that on demand? And I do not really have a very slow performance. And that is exactly what we are trying to accomplish in this presentation, to look into those challenges a lot more closely. So basically, in a nutshell, if I were to just summarize what exactly is Pure Storage providing, it is just not just about performance, it's about the agility, the cost, the reliability. When I talk about cost, it's just not the dollar amount, but it's just the cost efficiency. Like, for example, you have got so many different file stores that will be sitting, multiple file store or multiple repository inside a file store. And you could be actually getting some amount of data reduction at the back end, where the actual footprint of your data is less. That means you could be storing more for less. So your cost efficiency, the total ROI that you would have in your investment on a Pure Storage would be extremely higher compared to when you're starting to run the entire workload. As I was mentioning in the previous slide with the CI/CD workflow, it is just not a single tool with certain data sitting on a Pure Storage. It is the entire workflow that actually can be running on a Pure Storage data platform. So it's starting from a business, because it is a CI/CD is just a part of a bigger assembly line. It is a pipeline which can be connected to an analytics, AI, ML, and there's a lot of different pipelines that could be running in your environment. And I'll shortly touch upon a slide which talks about our portfolio. We are like a Swiss Army knife, where we have different modules to do different kind of workloads. But the continuity of data that you actually get, because the end user should not be actually saying, oh, do I have to move from one platform to another platform in order to have my entire workflow working? You don't have to. That is the reason why the API integration is so crucial, and that is what I was talking about in the previous slide. So security, adoption in cloud, and modernizing your applications, the total end user experience, and obviously all the other pipelines that connect into the CI/CD flow, where JFrog Artifactory could be one of the pivotal points in the entire workflow. Now, in a nutshell, who is Pure? For people who are not aware of who Pure is, we are about a 1.68 billion company. We've got an 83.5 NPS score. This is fantastic, and we are a leader in the space for the eighth year. And this is exactly the Gartner data that we have. You can clearly see that we are a leader in the space. And just to give you a bit of a touch on the portfolio, and you notice there are so many different hardware gears sitting over there, and it says, okay, I can see so many different workloads splashed around in the slide. That means I need to be looking for very specific workloads. Yes, because as I said, when you look into a Swiss Army knife, you will be having different modules to do different jobs, but it's still under one bundle. This all together, and that's exactly what it is. What it is all we have is a data continuity, irrespective of what platform you're having, and you can move around things. From an end user perspective, you wouldn't hardly know these changes or the kind of data that where you're accessing the data, but you are getting the right SLO, the service level agreement that you're having, the offering that is being designed for this environment the performance, the latency for your application, the number of IOPS that you probably would do from a database which needs a very low latency versus something which is more distributed, which is more scalable, and which needs a lot more throughput, higher throughput. So you cannot have one device doing everything. So we don't have, I would say, a ton of devices, but we have got very specific areas of workloads that we can actually position certain devices which can be contributing to your overall performance and the operational efficiency that you're looking for. Now, for this presentation, we'll be looking on a FlashBlade, which is where we have got a multi-protocol support. We support files and objects, and that's where the fast object comes in. They're completely Flash-driven, and because all of our products are Flash. So we will be highlighting how a shared data platform like a FlashBlade could be effective for an application like Artifactory. And we have got some performance numbers to talk about as we move forward. But if you look into the different application and workloads we could be handling on this platform, starting from technical computing, which is your high performance computing that you normally see in a high file count environments, which is file based. We do analytics, AI, your cloud native applications, which are something which can be done on premise, your modern application. They could be running on an NFS or an object at the back end. And data protection. Supposing you would like to back up your data onto your FlashBlade and you need to have a faster recovery time, because it's just not about backing up your data and protecting it, but it's also restoring it from the backup process and how fast you can actually recover from that. So those are the things which we normally touch upon, and these are the most commonly used use cases. The other thing which I'd like to highlight here is when I talked about file and object, we actually follow from the Amazon S3 protocol spec, as well as in the file side, we support both NFS version 3, 4.1, and SMB 2.1. So these are all natively supported file-based protocol and object-based, which your application can connect to directly, either from an application stack or through APIs or through integrations that we are providing, which can actually completely complete your the entire workflow seamlessly as you start to move from left to right in your CI/CD or any other pipelines that you may connect. So let's look into a typical JFrog Artifactory. This is an HA architecture where you actually have a front-ending Nginx server, which is working as a layer 7 load balancer that connects to your JFrog Artifactory servers, which is basically running in multiple servers that you're having in your data center. And as you start to run out of capacity, you keep on adding more and more servers to it. And that actually the server sprawl that happens in your environment, that is where a lot of customer challenges come up because they say, well, I've got so many servers to manage and patch them and maintain them, back up my data. And so it's not really a useful way of handling or optimized way of handling my resources. So that is where we come up with some of these major challenges. First of all is the server sprawl that I spoke about, because you keep on adding more and more servers as you run out of capacity. But do you really need the compute for that? No. All you need is capacity. Why do you need to add multiple servers? And second, I have seen people actually running in petabytes to close to terabytes on just physical servers, local servers. And at some point of time, they are looking for more better approach to handle that amount of data that is growing, because the data is still happening and that is not stopping. So how do I actually handle the scale in which the data is growing, yet also give the performance that I'm looking for my end users? And second, you probably would know that if there is a common artifact that has been shared by different repos inside a file store, and you start to back up, then that instance of the artifact that has been shared will have multiple copies of every repository that that particular artifact was shared. So that means if you have got a 10 gig production size file store, I'm just throwing out an example, your backup target could be a really inflated one, because it may be like 18 gig. Because that particular artifact that has been shared in production, when you back it up, that referral point becomes a physical entity for every repository that is being backed up. Now, a lot of customers or businesses choose not to go do backup anymore. And even if you go to the JFrog Artifactory website, they say anything that goes beyond 1 terabyte, we would like to have the storage vendor that the application is running on to take care of the backup, which is a valid argument from a justification from a JFrog, but that is exactly what the challenge is about. How do I back up so much amount of data? And then the silos, like I was mentioning earlier, because you have got various different phases of your workload, and that could be setting on heterogeneous platforms where the data is going to be useful on every part of your workflow. But how do you actually move that part? And then the efficiency, see, and the performance. The performance is another key, because when you actually upload or download your artifacts, if it is not it doesn't have the right speed, or you're not performing well, which I think in our organizations, also in our engineering organizations, we are using JFrog Artifactory as one of the major binary repository tool. And we also had some challenges initially. We went through the journey, and I'm going to talk about it more towards the end of the presentation, is how Pure Storage also went through a journey of optimizing JFrog Artifactory in our environment. And then finally, I was talking the total cost of ownership, because that's where the efficiency comes in. It is just not the operational efficiency, it's the cost efficiency also. So let's look into this, the layout that we actually validated, the architecture that we validated, irrespective of running Artifactory on a bare metal VM or Kubernetes environment. So the way we designed this is we are putting because FlashBlade, as I said, is a multi-protocol, that means we support files and objects. We designed the database component of Artifactory to sit over NFS, and I'll tell you why. And then we put the entire file store on object. Now, there are a couple of things here. First of all, we chose to go with NFS because there are some customers who say, I would like to use an HA proxy or some kind of a load balancer where I can have two versions of my Postgres database pointing to a same data share or NFS share, where I can actually do a failover. If one of my services or servers goes down, I still have an ability to still stay connected, because in Artifactory, if you lose your database, you lose all your paths to your repo, because that's the metadata. And once you lose the metadata, you just can't access any of your packages or artifacts. The checksums that you'd be storing, that they're all gone. Even though physically they're there, but you can't access. So the metadata, to keep them up to date and also available all the time, you need to have an HA. So NFS is getting more and more popularity, because that will help us. And that there is always an argument, hey, can I just not put that in my local storage back to the NVMe? Absolutely, you can do it. But when you have an heterogeneous setup, like a database sitting on a local servers back to the NVMe, with your repository sitting on a FlashBlade object store, how do you take a backup? How do you take a consistency between the database? You can obviously say, well, I'm going to take the server consistency or snapshotting capability there, and then I'm going to take it another one with the repository or the file store. But it may not be an application consistent. It could be a crash consistent. So that's the reason where we will also have to evaluate other ways. Are we really going with a backup as one of your requirements? If that is the question, you've got to ask them, because do you really need to back up the data? Or we just use it as long as you want, and after a period of time, we just move it over to a different tier of storage, to archival. So it will be a long-term retention. We probably don't need it for immediate future, but at least we don't need to throw it away. So that'll be much more easier, because you just do not have to go through the backup process. But there's some businesses who still want to have a periodic backup, and that is perfectly fine. But putting that on the same storage platform can definitely help you to have those consistencies a little more. It'll be much more easier for you to have the proper consistency in there. That's one of the reasons. The other thing, if you notice very closely, there is something called a cache. So Artifactory has got a read cache and a write cache. And I think I have got a slide later on. When they introduced the support for S3, in 7.4, they took away the eventual. Eventual is the write cache, which obviously is not available out of the box. You can obviously work with JFrog to get those features if that is something which you absolutely needed. But if you're configuring that on a bucket on the back end, because we are a fast object, it's all flash, and why do we need a write caching? Why do we need a staging of upload when you're uploading your objects? So they took that away. By default, it's not available. We do have a read cache. I think the read cache by default until the new latest version I saw, the 7.27 that got released a few weeks ago, they still support 5 terabytes. 5 gig actually. But you can actually grow that to whatever size. Now, if you actually have that cache sitting on an NFS share, and because our storage is thin provision, you can actually grow and shrink your cache, number one. Number two, we also saw some amount of data reduction. If your data is sitting in the cache, your footprint of your data is also minimized because the data reduction FlashBlade takes care of it. And I've got some performance numbers I'm going to show where we actually had the database configured on a local storage, which is all SSD, versus on a FlashBlade, which is over NFS, and we didn't see much difference. But yet there is a operational benefit that you get because of the caching capability, where you can actually grow and shrink the cache. And then obviously on the right hand side, you see that object, and we do support versioning, object versioning, because as I said, we follow the S3 standards. We've been supporting versioning, and that versioning will help us to do a replication. When I say replication, supposing you do collaboration across multi-site or remote sites across the globe, well, Artifactory has an ability of syncing up the database synchronously across all the sites, and you can list all the objects or your packages in every site, but you probably won't be finding the local data there. And from an array, we can actually do a replication, a bucket replication, to all of these locations asynchronously. And once you click on that on those objects, depending upon the schedule, how frequently you're going to replicate them, and we are all doing. The first time would be a baseline replication, but the rest of them will be all delta changes that will be replicated. And depending upon the schedule that you have for the replication, your remote sites will be also updated with all the data. So when you click on a particular object or a package in a remote site, and those will be all available locally. That's how we collaborate. So this was what I was referring to. So this was actually a change that happened in Artifactory 7.4. And for S3 buckets, you would be now seeing an S3 storage v3 showing up, and the eventual write cache is no longer there. So this is the binary store XML file which Artifactory has. You can feed in all the bucket information, the endpoint information, the access key, secret key, and your bucket name. Once you include all of that, just restart your service if it is a bare metal. If you're running in Kubernetes, restart your pods, and you're now pointing to the backend storage. Now, today, Artifactory only supports one bucket for the entire file store. Maybe in the future they will be supporting multiple buckets, but at this time it is just one bucket for the entire file store. Whereas if you're doing it over NFS, that means both your your database as well as your file store over NFS, not going over the buckets, then you can still continue your sharding, because you don't need sharding when you're doing it in buckets. But you can continue your sharding of your file system the way you would normally do, and you can still be working on a FlashBlade. So we did carry out a test, and this is something which we jointly carried out with JFrog. And what we did was we tried to measure the download speed specifically, because a lot of customers were more paranoid and concerned about the download speed than the upload speed. So we started testing from sizes from 1K to all the way to 10K. And we just randomly picked up all these files and started to upload them through a test process. And we were doing that on a single bucket in FlashBlade. As I said, Artifactory only supports for the entire file store a single bucket. We tested that on a single bucket on a FlashBlade. Now, this is what we saw, and we compared that with one of the major cloud provider S3 storage. The same test. There is an apple-to-apple comparison. There is no difference in the buckets. In the file sizes. They say same file sizes, but you notice that 3 different scenarios were tested. Obviously, there is one in Amazon S3. The other one was having the database and the read cache and the local storage, and then the entire setup over NFS and S3 on FlashBlade. Now, as I was mentioning, the middle bar and the third one, they will hardly see any difference because there was none. But obviously, running it on FlashBlade was definitely about 62% faster compared to Amazon S3. And that's the reason why we call that as fast object, because of the performance that we provide. So what happens here, we've got a 62% improvement, but there is not much difference, and that was expected. But the operational benefit I was mentioning to you was the caching capability that you can grow and shrink on the FlashBlade, plus the data reduction you get from the FlashBlade also. And depending upon the file store, the type of repositories that you're having, like if you're going with the Docker images, you will not be seeing any kind of data reduction because that's a completely different kind of a file system. It's a layered file system. You hardly see much difference or any data reduction. But if you are looking into other C++ packages or NPM packages and all of other packages, you probably see about at least minimum of 2:1, and it could be more, depending upon what kind of packages you are having. So this is where we see a huge amount of benefit from a performance perspective, as we're talking about, and it's being a standard data platform, a shared data platform. You don't go through the management sprawl anymore because you've now got a data platform which can actually scale with capacity as well as with performance, because we are a distributed file system. So we are performance from a performance perspective, we scale linearly. We have done lots of testing on this one on our platform, and we have got multiple evidence saying that workloads running on FlashBlade, which has got affinity to files and objects, we completely can scale linearly for any kind of workloads. So the other aspect was, as I was mentioning, yeah, I've done all the architecture. I've got this entire production environment running on FlashBlade with the backend storage using buckets and fast object. We've been running this for the last 6 months to a year right now. But there are a lot of artifacts and binary packages that's sitting idle, has hardly been touched. And I don't want to really waste my expensive flash storage for those idle artifacts and packages. So there are two approaches we can take from here. Now, one approach is you can either replicate all your old objects and packages based on a lifecycle policy. We support a lifecycle policy. That means you can set up a policy saying that anything that is beyond 45 days or certain hours of the day or the week, you would like to move it over to a different tier of storage. Now that is absolutely doable. What will happen is we just go to expire once the object or the package gets moved over to a different tier. Like in this case, we're moving to Amazon S3. And once we do that, that is done through a bucket replication capability. We are replicating that content or that particular object over to an Amazon S3 bucket. Once that happens, then we go ahead and expire that particular package or the object sitting in the production FlashBlade on premise. So that'll free up a lot of your space. Now here's the gotcha. Now this is an array level operation. How does your Artifactory database get updated? It does not, because Artifactory doesn't understand what's going on in the back of under the covers. The other choice is if you do not want to archive it. So some businesses are going ahead and deleting them. What you do is you don't turn on versioning on the FlashBlade, and you go ahead and delete them. So as soon as those objects show up or those packages show up in your trash can, the Artifactory trash can, you just go and clean them up. Once you do that, what happens is now your database on your Artifactory is updated because those what do you call objects are gone, or those packages are gone, and then the garbage collector kicks in the FlashBlade and cleans it up. So you're not only saving space in there, but also updating your database. Now this could be sounding a little contradictory, saying, okay, if I'm deleting, then there's no point in archiving. That's true. But there are some use cases where customers would like to do long-term retention. And when you do that, obviously you're freeing up the space in the storage, but your database doesn't get updated. Now, there is a better way of doing it. In 7.27, Artifactory version 7.27, which just got released, Artifactory JFrog launched their cold storage. And cold storage is where you actually can run another instance in the cloud, and JFrog actually can go ahead and do the replication, which does an HTTP replication. Now, what is there for pure storage for that matter? Yeah, you can still do HTTP replication, but if that performance is not good enough, then you can do array level replication, which is asynchronous, and your database gets updated. Your source location, based on the lifecycle policy, you are dropping all the objects, and then you get your space, your database gets updated on the source because of the cold storage, and you still get another location where you can actually fire up an instance of the Artifactory running, pointing to those old artifacts that you're having. So it all depends on how you want to choose to go with it. But the entire integration with Artifactory has got different facets. And whichever way you would like to drive the integration, it can be doable. And then finally, we all saw the performance. We saw how do we move the data across different tiers. How do I manage? How do I take a look at the performance? How many connections I'm having? So Prometheus comes in mind, Grafana dashboards comes in mind. While Artifactory has an ability to use open metric APIs, so does Pure Storage. So we also have something called Pure Exporter, which can be connected to your Prometheus as a data source, which feeds into to your Grafana dashboards. So you can continue watching your Grafana dashboards for your Artifactory as your endpoint, along with your storage components too. Like how much amount of throughput I'm getting. You can keep an eye on that. You can archive the data, your performance data. You can set up your reporting and alerting tools based on that. So all of those things can also work together because of the pieces that we are put together and how it connects to the tools like Prometheus and Grafana. So just to wrap this up, as to say, the next two slides, I'm going to talk about what exactly I'm trying to accomplish here in this entire validation. So we started off with the challenges like the server sprawl. We're going to get rid of that. We're replacing that with something like FlashBlade, which has got both file and S3 support. We've seen data compression, as I said, for the cache volumes, which is sitting on over NFS. And then the download speed. We are definitely getting a much better speed because we are in fast object. It's all flash. So with the speed, download speed is a lot more faster. Obviously, we have to take into consideration a few other optimization in your environment, the Nginx cache that you're putting together in the front end of that for the entire Artifactory operations. The entire stack has been optimized. Actually, if you look into the handouts, there is a link to the white paper that I wrote, which has got all the information about the optimizations you can possibly do, not only in the Artifactory on the FlashBlade, the best practices, but also in the Nginx layer and a few other areas of your infrastructure. And then obviously increase your Artifactory cache size seamlessly because it is sitting over NFS and FlashBlade is thin provision. You can grow and shrink your size of your cache at will. And finally, the replication that we do for collaboration as well as for archival. You'll be collaborating across multi-site and remote locations, or you could be still archiving it into cloud using our bucket replication capability. And then this is the slide which I would talk about the journey that we as a company, Pure Storage, has taken. And if you notice, we started off in 2016, the first implementation using iSCSI on a flash array. This is another product we had over iSCSI. And then started to move on to a FlashBlade in 2017, which is obviously using still Artifactory Pro. But we moved on to Enterprise in 2019. And then we are working in a sharded environment over NFS today. And we are testing out S3 to move into S3 moving in the future. So these are the this is our path that we took as we started to build our Artifactory environment. If you notice that we are at least 630 plus terabyte right now, and we're growing. So just to wrap this up, the value that we're trying to provide with Artifactory on Pure Storage, specifically on FlashBlade, is just not just to modernize it, but also to provide a standard data platform with an integrated workflow. As I said in the very first slide when we started off with the CI/CD workflow, it is just not one tool sitting on it, but it's the entire workflow that you run on a Pure Storage, irrespective of running it on a flash array or a FlashBlade, because you normally tend to get all the data continuity that you're looking for, because the data formatting is what we take care of. And then finally, the lower cost because of the data reduction, the footprint of data. That means you're getting more, we're doing more with less storage. And that itself is the operational efficiency, the cost efficiency that you're getting as you start to own FlashBlade in your environment. So that's all I have for now. For this presentation, now open for Q&A.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great presentation, Bikash. We do have some questions for you from the audience. While we do those or take those questions, I'm just going to bring up our first of 3 polls for everyone out there. The question on the screen is currently Artifactory is configured on. If you're using Artifactory, we would like your feedback on this, exactly where you're running Artifactory on premises in the public cloud, or what your status is. So let's see. First question that came in here, Bikash, they're asking, can the Artifactory database be configured on local or any other storage vendor platform?
Great question. The database can be configured anywhere, but you still have to keep in mind the heterogeneity of this entire infrastructure, the way you actually manage and protect the data. That's the important point. But will this work? Absolutely, it will work.
Excellent. All right. Let's see. Another question here. They want to know, how is on-premises S3 support in Artifactory going to help with modernizing applications?
Yeah, great questions, because as I said, more and more modern applications are tending to use object store as a shared storage choice of shared storage platform. But most of the vendors today use object store as a cheap and deep storage for mostly long-term archival. But they don't really give the performance that is needed for an application to run it in production. So this is where we come in as Pure Storage, where we provide, as I was mentioning, FlashBlade specifically has an ability of supporting both files and S3. So you can have applications running over NFS, you can run SMB, and at the same time collaborate or say coexist with applications which could be having buckets at the back end too. So that is where I think the modernization attempt is all heading towards, in that direction. And that's where the proximity of being in the cloud or getting closer to cloud also becomes more of a reality. We have got a lot of other solutions which when we can talk about, obviously this we cannot be talking about in this presentation, but we do have, and people can reach out to us directly to learn more about the proximity of cloud adjacent, cloud connected, kind of solutions that we are also offering. So that gives you a lot more collective integration with just not an on-premise setup, but also a gateway to how do you connect to cloud.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for going over all those different options. I mean, I love the idea of fast object storage, because that's might be new to some folks out there. When they think about object storage, they might not think about high speed, high performance. I just brought up the second poll question out here for everyone that says, what are your day-to-day Artifactory administration activities? And I see quite a few responses already, so thank you for those. While you all answer that poll, let's go on to our next question here. And they're asking, can Artifactory on FlashBlade be integrated into the rest of the DevOps workflow?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you remember in the very first beginning, I had the entire workflow sitting on Pure Storage, and that is a reality today. We have customers who are running Bitbucket on FlashBlade along with Artifactory on FlashBlade, and the entire build, which would be Jenkins driven, would be running completely on FlashBlade. So they have the proximity of data for the entire workflow, which would be sitting on a Pure platform. And you don't have to really move across silos for that matter. That was one of the challenges a lot of our customers have today in the production environment. And data has gravity, and it is not an easy way to move data around and when you are having heterogeneous platforms. So having a continuity in the way you access data for the end user experience, that's very important, and we are capable of providing that today.
Excellent. All right. And then I appreciate everyone who responded to those first 2 polls. We've got another poll question here, a final poll that says, what additional information would you like about Pure Storage? And we'll leave that up while we continue to take your questions. Don't forget about our best question prize as well. If you have something on your mind, you're wondering maybe exactly how this might work, now's the time to get that question in. Let's see, here's another question. This one comes from Mark, who's asking about, does JFrog do scanning of software artifacts for new vulnerabilities?
Yes, they do. They have something called an X-ray product, which is obviously another product portfolio they have in the portfolio. We can obviously reach out to JFrog for more information about that. But yes, the short answer is yes, they do.
Okay, excellent. And then I know another question here that came in. They're asking, what do you recommend folks do if they're interested in this, they want to get started, but maybe they don't have a lot of experience, maybe in JFrog Artifactory or object storage in general. Any recommended resources?
Well, they can learn more from the handouts we had provided, the links we have shared, and the white paper and the blog, just to get a little more information. But if they're still really interested to pursue this, they can obviously reach out to the local contact, asking about what is the presentation that we did, and they listened to the entire architecture that we have been validating with Artifactory. They can definitely ask for the local account teams for the respective accounts that they're having in their location, and they would definitely come back internally and reach out to me and our team to engage with a lot of the customer requirements and how do we actually can move forward. And again, JFrog has been a great partner with us, and we would like to start to investigate any of these, any prospective customers who are looking to have a solution on pure storage.
Absolutely. Excellent. Yeah, that reminds me, I want to point out the handout there that's in your audience console. There's a great white paper on modernizing JFrog Artifactory on S3 compatible FlashBlade. It goes into how these two integrate, architecture, data challenges, the JFrog Artifactory on FlashBlade validated architecture, test results, and recommendations. So make sure that you check out that resource. There's also a link there to the blog where you can learn more. Vikash, I think that's all the time we have for questions. We've covered, I believe, everything that's come in. Really excellent presentation. Thank you so much for being on the webinar today.
Thank you, David, and thank the audience for spending the time listening in for this presentation. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, of course, to Pure Storage as well for supporting us on the event today. If you haven't responded to the poll, we would like your feedback on that still. And I will leave that up while I announce our Amazon $300 gift card winner. This is going out to Alvin Chen from California. Congratulations. We'll reach out to you. And we will also be reaching out to our best question prize winner as well. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the webinar today. Don't forget about the handouts tab there for additional information. And of course, visit purestorage.com as well. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.